Hi, Taylor from Doomed to Fail. Today we're re-releasing episode 5, part 1, the story of Anne Boleyn, who was the second of Henry VIII's wives. Not the first to be doomed. He wasn't very nice to his first wife either. And learn a little bit more about who got beheaded, who got divorced, who changed religions, who refused to change religions, who was exiled, all those things, just so Henry VIII could have an heir. But spoiler alert, Anne Boleyn, her daughter, did become Queen Elizabeth. So good for her. Let us know what you think, and I'll see you on the other side.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Hello and welcome to Doomed to Fail, the only podcast in existence where we advocate not killing your family. I'm Fars, joined by my co-host Taylor, and every week we'll bring you two stories, one historical and one true crime of relationships that were doomed to fail, and call out the red flags as we see them. Taylor, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
I'm tired. We are recording this incredibly late per our usual recording schedule because I spent the entire day moving, and I'm ready to just kind of collapse.
Great. Well, I'm glad that we're doing this to wind down your day, and then you can, I don't know, watch a movie, go to bed, unpack tomorrow.
Yes.
Don't worry about it today. Yeah.
Yes. And I also want to call out thanks to everybody who's been listening and who has been providing feedback, especially about my terrible audio quality. I have no idea how this is going to actually sound once I upload it, but I will say that I now have a much more professional setup, and hopefully it's going to sound a lot better than it did before in the past.
And you look great. I'll work on my podcast face, and we can get this on YouTube because you look very profesh.
The mic in the face, it helps.
I think in response to feedback, this is me talking slow, America. I'm really trying hard, so you can make me slower by lowering the speed of your podcast.
Yeah, Taylor has one speed, and it's fast forward ahead.
This is me trying my absolute fucking best for you right now.
Absolutely. So what is our signature drink going to be this week?
Cool. So we have two drinks this week. One of them is a signature cocktail from South Carolina where our true crime story takes place. It's sweet tea vodka. So you steep tea bags in a jar of vodka to make the concentrate, let it sit for a few hours, and then when the vodka gets dark, you can pour it over ice, add some lemon juice, simple syrup, and then add some water or syrup as well, because it's going to be just vodka. And I told you that I have something to say about this because after college, my roommate and we bought a Brita specifically for filtering shitty vodka through. So we would buy like the worst vodka possible, put it through the Brita like 6 times. Then we put it into jars with like pears or tea bags or strawberries or like something and let it sit for like a few weeks. And then it was freaking delicious. And we just probably should be dead because we would drink like a teacup of like vodka that tastes like tea, and it was delicious. And
I hear that's really easy to overconsume given how,
yeah,
because you don't really taste the vodka.
No, it's just like delicious. Like the pear one was so good. And you're like, this is juice. And you're like, no. You just drank a glass of vodka and now you're asleep.
Yeah. So I looked up the recipe for this and I was surprised at how detailed it was because I thought it would just take some vodka and pour some tea in it. But no.
Oh, right. No, you're not like mixing it with like a pre-made, like a Lipton.
No, you're not.
No.
You're creating a concentrate, then, the added syrup and lemon. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
That's the key. It's also the danger.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. As with a lot of things Southern, it is a little bit more ornate than one would assume.
Well, I can't wait to hear more from the South when you do your story. The drink, well, mine's alcoholic too. I tried my best, but whatever. My drink for this episode is mead. Have you ever had mead? It's like a sweet wine.
It's not the thing Germans make, right? Where it's in a crock pot.
No, that's like a mulled wine.
Okay. I have no idea what it is.
So a mead is like a sweet wine that you like drank in like medieval times. And I had mead for the first time when I was studying abroad in London in grad school. And my friends and I went on a tour of the Tower of London, bought a bottle of mead, and then drank it on a boat on the Thames. So that's exactly where our story takes place. So imagine yourself drinking mead or sweet tea or whatever you want, just in regular sweet tea with no booze. And I will jump in to talk a little bit about Henry VIII
Yeah,
and his six wives.
love it.
So six is a lot of wives. We'll talk about maybe one in particular where a big thing happened and a big change happened. But I also want to give a little bit of like background into what we're talking about and where we are. So Henry VIII was born in 1491. And what do you know about Henry VIII?
Anne Boleyn. I only know Anne
Yes.
Boleyn. That's it.
Okay. And what happened to her?
She had to have been killed. I mean,
Yes.
okay.
She was beheaded. So there's a little bit of beheading in this story and lots of blood. I promise violence, and I have violence in here.
Thanks
But the
for being
reason,
staying committed.
yeah, the reason that we're getting to the violence talking about this is like because Henry VIII couldn't get divorced, and there's some reasons that he wanted to be divorced, and we'll talk about those. But I was like thinking, why can't Catholics get divorced? Like God says no, but like why? Like why is that the rule? And I went to collaborativedivorcetexas.com, which has a really actually great history of divorce. And in other cultures are okay with it, like we talked about with Pocahontas and Kocoum. So who wants like this couple in the village to be yelling at each other all the time? No one. So you let them get divorced, and who cares? In some places, they make it really, really hard. And I'm like, why do they make it hard? And so from my like 7 minutes of research on collaborativedivorcetexas.com and being who I am, I think it's just to control women because then if you can't get divorced, then like you don't have to pay back the dowry. You don't have to like apologize for the things that you're doing to this person. You can just like abuse them and everything's fine. And you don't have to. And I guess that goes both ways, but there's no like admitting to your guilt or anything. You just like have to stay married. And also they wanted to like make sure that like they were there, that their kids were there. So they're like adultery is a crime punishable by death. So you have to only be with me and have my kids. A lot of this is like thinking about your birth line and her being hereditarily related to, anyone in your line, which is dumb. So I wrote down that this is dumb. And I also was thinking about another Catholic theory that I have, and I was thinking about why you can't meet on Fridays when you're a Catholic. And I have this theory that is not backed by anything, that like it's probably because the meat would be bad on Fridays and people were getting sick and they were like, let's stop. Let's like make a reason for people not to eat meat on Fridays. I don't know if that's true, but that's like what I feel like. There has to be an economic reason for all these roles,
That makes
So,
sense.
yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. But anyway, I
Economic
thought
or control of others.
people, yeah,
People, yeah.
Exactly. So I was just like on a rabbit hole thinking about that, and I found an article on NPR called Lust, Lies, and Empire, the Fishy Tale Behind Eating Fish on Friday. And there's actually Henry VIII is actually, I was just thinking about that because I was thinking about Catholicism, but Henry VIII is actually tied to eating fish on Fridays. So before all of Henry VIII's stuff, like leaving the Catholic Church, you would eat fish on Fridays. You wouldn't eat meat, and it was because you couldn't eat anything with a womb for whatever reason.
Really? Wait,
Mhm.
that was the reason that you had to
Yeah,
eat fish?
yeah. And
Or the
like I don't know,
justification?
yeah,
Yeah.
that was the justification. Yeah. And so like in the article, they're like, I guess you could eat a lizard, but like no one wants to do that. So they were eating fish.
I mean, yeah, I didn't know fish. I never thought about it.
Me either. And I don't really, I don't, now I'm thinking like, well, then where do the eggs live? I don't know. I don't know. And I don't
This
care.
this is how you go down rabbit holes.
Whatever. So, but actually, so fish is super easy to take on the road. So you could dry fish and go on a boat for 6 months and like eat dried cod for that whole entire time. And so people were doing that and going and like, using it a lot when like, there wasn't a lot of like other meat available. But there's so many Catholic holidays where you couldn't eat meat. So you ate fish. And so after Henry VIII left the Catholic Church, people could eat meat again, and things got really, really bad for the fishing industry. And they were pissed because they were like, well, because if you come down to it, people would choose a hamburger over a fish,
Any
and
day.
people were like, oh, okay, I'd rather do this. And so then Henry VIII's son, when he becomes king later in our story, brings back the no meat on Fridays. So people to help the fishermen. which I just thought was interesting. And then another thing that I thought was fun is in the 1960s, the Pope relaxed some of the rules on eating fish and eating meat on Fridays. And then that also was a big blow to the fishing industry. So it happens over and over again when like the church makes these rules and they have like huge economic impacts. And then the filet o fish at McDonald's
I
was
was
invented.
just thinking about the filet o fish. I'm so
That's
glad you
why
brought it up.
that's literally why it was invented. There was a guy who owned a McDonald's franchise around in a big Catholic neighborhood, and he wasn't getting any business on Fridays. So he made a filet of fish.
So did you know what the precursor to filet o fish was?
What?
It was grilled pineapple between
Ew.
buns. Yeah.
That sounds terrible.
I mean, I've never had a filet. I don't think I want to have a filet of fish.
So I wanted to, because my mom loves them, and I was like nervous I was gonna like them, and like always want one. And then I had one with my mom, and she was like, "This is not the best filet of fish I've ever had," and so she wants me to try it again because the one I had was not very good.
Yeah, I'll get around to it. Once I've exhausted all the McRibs, then maybe I'll try a filet of fish.
There's cheese on it, which I don't
That's
really
weird.
understand. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. So anyway, that's a little bit of history about fish in the Catholic Church, but there's all these rules. So we're in a time period of the world where the Catholic Church has a lot of power and there's a ton of rules. So on October 31st, 1517, Martin Luther starts the Protestant Reformation. So people were paying the Catholic Church to get into heaven because of course they were. And this is the same time that all this stuff is happening with Henry VIII. And basically Henry VIII is saying throughout this whole story, well, I'm the king and God does what I want. So whatever I want to do is what God wants. Of course, yes.
Yeah,
So
because
that's what he's saying, people.
my understanding of the royalty is that is kind of the assumption is that I'm here because I was chosen to be here.
Yes, exactly. So he's going to use that when he's like making his decisions to change some things about the church. And then I wrote, what are the differences between Protestant and the Church of England and Catholicism? And then my next bullet is, I don't care. Like, I don't know. I kind of looked it up. It's like there's always like matrices of like very like beliefs that people believe and whatever. So either way, there's differences and there's reasons why people move to different ones. And so people are leaving the church for various reasons. So I want to pause here before I actually talk about Henry VIII and all of his wives. This can be like a 9-hour podcast. I'm going to do it in like 10 minutes. So we're really going to like rush through these ladies, but these relationships were all doomed. And I wanted to pause and talk about the royal family in England because while researching this, I was like, actually, good for you, Meghan Markle, for saying out loud that this shit's dumb. Because it's always been dumb, but like people haven't said it in a while, maybe. And like hereditary lines to power are dumb. Like even like our most recent Queen Elizabeth, she was only in line for the throne because her uncle, who was the first one in line, married someone else and had to quit, you know?
So do you know I was born in the UK?
No.
Yeah, I was born in Newcastle, England, and I had zero interest or affiliation with anything that has to do with the core of the UK, which is the royal family. I never cared. Don't know. I have no idea what the genealogy looks like, what any of that, like who succeeded who because of whatever reason. Like it's all foreign to me, and I kind of like it. I kind of don't think that my brain needs to apply itself towards learning that shit.
No, literally, who cares? It's really dumb. And so, I mean, long story, Elizabeth, who just died, her dad was the king, but he was only the king because his brother, who was the king before him, wanted to marry a woman who had been divorced, and they wouldn't let him. And so he quit being king to marry this like other woman. But like his kids would have been in line, then Elizabeth was in line. So it's just like any little thing can like move these lines around and whatever. So Henry is like one of the last kings in the House of Tudor. I don't know what that means. It's like very complicated, but it's pretty much just like the rich get richer.
So the King's Speech, wasn't that guy the one that took over because the other guy wanted to marry the divorced woman? Yeah.
Yes.
And then wasn't she a Nazi or something?
Wallace Simpson? I don't know. She's American.
Okay, maybe it was like more he has some association or affiliation with, or like empathy. I don't know. I'm probably talking about an ass. So like, let's not. I'm probably gonna cut this out.
No, I think I think you might be right. That is ringing some bells because I do know that like JFK's dad was the ambassador to England during that time, like during right before World War II, and he was like, let's just hear what Hitler has to say. Come on,
He had some
guys, let's not
problematic
do a war.
beliefs. Yeah.
So that's not great.
No.
So possibly. But either way, it's all bullshit.
Yeah,
And a
it's just
lot of people are gonna
cousins
die.
fucking cousins and just
Yeah.
intermarrying and ugh, yeah.
Ugh, so many people are about to die like for money. It's real dumb. But
Yeah.
But anyway, so here we go. So Henry VIII is actually the second son of King Henry VII. He was born in 1491, and his brother Arthur is set to take the throne. So Arthur, the older brother, marries Catherine of Aragon. She's from Spain. She's really young, like a teenager, and she marries Arthur, and that marriage is never consummated. And I don't really know why. It sounds like they were just young and like didn't really know again like what to do or weren't able to do it. And I believe that because Catherine of Aragon was very, very Catholic, and what happens next depends on like her honor and her virtue and all these things. So I believe her when she says that was not consummated because Arthur dies pretty young before the marriage was consummated. So the King Henry VII, still wants to have an alliance with Spain because that's really important for money. So he marries his second son, Henry, to Catherine, and they get around that by saying that because the first marriage to Arthur was never consummated, that Catherine can marry Henry, and Henry becomes Henry VIII
So
when his
much
dad dies.
revolves around virginity and like purity, and it's just like
Oh my God, so dumb. So she swears up and down she's a virgin. It's okay. So I have a little timetable. So at this point, his first wife, Catherine, she's 24 and Henry VIII is 18. So she's actually older than him because she had been married to his older brother. So she's older than him when they get married. And they're married for like 23 years. So they're married for a long time. During their relationship, they have one child. It's a girl. Boo, girls. No one wants a girl. And it is Mary. And Mary becomes like Mary, Queen of Scots, Bloody Mary, the one that is like in the history books for wanting to keep like Ireland and Scotland and parts of the UK, whatever, Catholic. So her mom was very Catholic. Mary's very Catholic. She is the first daughter of Henry VIII. But there's no sons.
bloody. So this is the Mary that you can say Bloody Mary in the mirror 3 times and she shows up.
No, that's like a weird ghost. But Bloody Mary is like the violent queen. They just have the same name. Like
I
I don't
kind
think
of,
it's like Mary Queen of Scots that comes up in the mirror. I think it's like someone else.
I might be confusing this with Candyman.
So good.
I think I'm.
We can just talk about that. Oh, I think Candyman's a love story. We can talk about that later,
It
but
is.
I
Oh,
do.
for sure it is. Yeah, yeah. Same page. We don't even have to argue this.
Great. Great. I didn't see the second one, but I will. So he's married to Catherine of Aragon. He's the king. She's a little bit older, and he needs a son. And he's like, why won't God give me a son? Why won't my dumb wife give me a son? Why can't she just do it? Like, that's possible to just
But
like be like, oh, I'll give you a son. I choose son this time.
But the part that's confusing is that they all need daughters for these alliances. So why are they
That's
pissed when they have
true.
daughters?
It's true. And he's like, I don't want to talk to her. And you're like, why? Like, I watched a movie from the 60s called Anne of a Thousand Days with Richard Burton playing Henry VIII, and it's real good and like real dramatic. But he definitely is like, I will never talk to this daughter. I hate her. And you're like, but you're right. They need to have daughters anyway because they have to like sell them off.
Yeah.
And like, yeah,
Short-sighted. These people are very short-sighted.
agree. So he's super upset. He wants a son. He's obviously in the meantime having a bunch of affairs. And as we'll see, that adultery is punishable by death unless you're him, of course. Like he can do whatever he wants, but like the woman is for death. So he gets a woman named Mary Boleyn pregnant. Guess who Mary Boleyn is? I can't hear you.
Oh, I muted myself on accident.
Okay.
I think that would be Anne's sister.
It's her sister. So he gets her sister pregnant. She's like one of his mistresses, which is super gross. And he also gets another, and so she has a son, actually, named Henry Carey. But he doesn't really want to marry her, and he couldn't marry her anyway because she's not a virgin, which is so dumb because you're like, it's your fault.
Hold on. Hold on. Who wasn't a virgin?
Mary Boleyn, because she was having an affair with Henry. He didn't want to marry her, and he was already married and all these things. So he didn't like take that extra effort to marry Mary Boleyn. She just had like a bastard child. And so
Who
did
is, she had to have been a virgin even if she was a virgin when they started hooking up.
I think it's like a little bit of that, and actually maybe a little bit more of like he was already married and didn't want to go through all the hullabaloo of like legitimizing this child, which
Okay.
I don't really know why.
Yeah, all right. It is
It
what it
sucks.
is.
It sucks to be Mary Boleyn. It's just I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah, sounds like.
Yeah.
Sucks to be married to this guy or in his orbit, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I feel like a red flag is like if a dude got your sister pregnant and abandoned her, he's not a good match
Yeah. Yeah,
for you.
that's a big red flag.
Henry also has another son with another mistress, and that son is also named Henry, another Henry Fitzroy. And that's the only one he acknowledged for whatever reason, but he became like a duke or something, but wasn't in line to be king because he wasn't an official child. So he's definitely like out there, like having babies, but he's sick and tired of having no sons with his wife, and he the only thing he can do is get it annulled because he's can't get divorced because of the Catholic Church. And they really won't let him like do anything. So all of a sudden, he's like, I'm sure that Catherine slept with my brother when they were married and that she'd been lying to me for 23 years. So because of that, he can say that makes Catherine of Aragon his sister because she slept with his brother, and that makes it incest, and that makes it annullable.
That is so many leaps in
It's
logic.
so many leaps and so dumb, but he actually gets it ends up leaving the Catholic Church to be able to officially just make it a divorce because the church won't give him an annulment because they're like that's dumb, and they won't give him a divorce because they don't do divorces. So this is when he starts the Church of England and becomes head of the church specifically so he can get divorced, and that's like
God, the
eighth grade
ego.
history,
The
you know?
ego. The fact that you could start your own religion and get people to kind of convert over to it. He's a cult leader. He's almost a cult leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, so many people are going to die, and he gets to sleep with everyone. He's exactly a cult leader. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So poor Catherine is like, this is BS. Like, I never, that's not true. It's my virtue. But she gets kind of exiled back to where she came from. And t until her death, she's like, I'm the rightful queen of England. And she wants her daughter Mary to, go back and rule and make England Catholic again, which she does in some way, shape, or form via violence. So now that he can get a divorce, and I'm thinking, like, why is he doing this? Like, this is crazy. It's so much work and so much violence. And it's just because she can't have a son and he really, really needs one. Like he really, really needs that legitimate son, or he's going to lose his line and lose his like heirs to the throne. So he can't like he has to have a legitimate son. So he has like really no other choice. So he meets a lady in waiting before he gets divorced, of course. It's Mary Boleyn's sister, Anne Boleyn. So Anne Boleyn is really like the reason that he did all of this because he wanted to marry her and not be married to Catherine of Aragon anymore. So Anne Boleyn, she was like of like mid-level status. She spent some time in France, comes back to England. The king like falls in love with her, whatever that means. And eventually, like maybe she loves him too, maybe it's a power thing. And by the time they get married, she's already pregnant with his baby, but it's like okay because he's divorced. There's a lot
Selective,
of
so many
a lot of
selective
logic.
rules. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot you have to do for this. So she has people in England are mad because they actually really loved Catherine. They saw how devout she was, like what a good wife she was. So they're pissed and like annoyed that he's married to Anne. Anne is either 32 or 26 when they get married. It's like not clear her exact date. And Henry is 42. So if she's 32 and he's 42, I feel like that's fine.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Yeah. So they get married and she's pregnant right away. And she has, guess what kind of baby she has?
I would assume inbred,
Well, fine, but it's a girl. So
which we don't like, obviously.
we have another girl, and her name's Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is actually going to be Queen Elizabeth, like the first Queen Elizabeth, and a whole bunch of crazy stuff happens with her. That is a whole other story.
So, can I interject here?
Yes, please.
So, there's been female monarchs.
Yeah.
Like, why do you have to have a son if you're the king? Because, as you just explained, your
Well,
daughter could also be the head of state.
Right. And she does become that, but I guess I don't know if that was the rule before this. Maybe before this it was all just all sons, and
It
then they
may
changed it. And maybe this
maybe
is the impetus for changing it because you'll see later that they like have to change it. They have to give it to Elizabeth.
if that was the
So
case, then it kind of does track, given like where humanity was at that point in time, that it was easier to invent a church to try and get a divorce than it was to change the rules and let a female be the head of state.
exactly. So I wanted to bring this up later, but I'll bring it up now. On the Disney Channel, they have, speaking of Disney, on the Disney Channel, they have these like really funny 5-minute videos of Olaf from Frozen retelling fairy tales. And it's like just him and he plays all the characters and it's really funny. And he does Aladdin, and in Aladdin, he's talking about how Jasmine can't be the ruler because she's a woman. And he's like, well, it's too bad your dad can't change the rules that he literally made up.
Yeah.
You're like, of course, that's exactly the point. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah. So still has a son. He has Elizabeth, and Elizabeth and her half sister Mary later will start a bunch of wars about religion, but not yet for now. Anne is trying to have another baby, but tragically, there's a bunch of miscarriages and some stillborn babies. So she does give birth to a son, but he is born stillborn. And right now, I'm thinking like, why wouldn't she just buy a baby from someone? Like, wouldn't you do that if like if you were like, the only thing I have to do is make a son. Why don't I just like find another white dude and buy a baby from him and pretend it's mine?
you're kind of doing like a Henry VIII situation here, where you're making a lot of leaps in judgment and assumptions here of like there is somebody out there who's like transacting babies, and also like what happens because you in theory have either faked a pregnancy at that point or you actually are pregnant, then you got to dispose of that baby. It just gets really complicated, it feels like.
I guess. I guess you're right. I guess that makes sense. It does. It is also more Game of Thrones because you know how in Game of Thrones there's all these like babies, but you're guaranteed somehow to have your dad's hair color in Game of
Oh
Thrones.
yeah, for sure, for
So
sure.
like, but like Elizabeth and Henry VIII actually both have red hair. So I guess you just find another ginger and be like, this one is yours, Henry.
You know, whenever you were describing his plan on getting annulled, the whole incest thing, like
Hmm.
I forgot for a moment that we're talking about a king. And so this was not somebody just sitting around like waxing poetic on his own. This was probably a team of like the most
Hmm.
elite members of society trying to devise a
Absolutely.
way.
Yeah,
Which I
it's
mean,
like
you could probably bring that tag team back together to figure out how to sell a child and buy a new one.
yes. So now I'm back on she should
Yeah,
have done
yeah,
that.
right.
I
Yeah.
could go either way, but I feel like maybe she tried and it didn't work out. But either way, she never has a boy. And Henry's like, this is bullshit. I have to leave. And he's already like eyeing someone else, one of her ladies in waiting. And so now he wants to divorce Anne, but he's embarrassed a little bit. He's like, we have to get divorced, like this isn't gonna work. And she won't do it. But he charges her with having a bunch of affairs. And in one of the podcasts I listened to about her life, they were saying that she totally had all these affairs, but I don't believe that because that would literally be life or death for her, you know? So I would feel like she'd be more likely to buy a baby than to have an affair because as you'll find out, like she gets killed for having an affair that she didn't even have. So
Spoiler.
yeah, spoiler alert, Anne dies. So he accused her of having an affair and he wants a divorce or like an annulment because of that. And she won't do that because if she does, then Elizabeth is out of line to be queen. So if they get divorced or annulled, then that like legitimizes, I don't know, legitimizes their marriage.
Delegitimizes.
Legitimate, whatever. So if they do that, then Elizabeth is no longer in line for the throne, and she won't do that. So they accused her of adultery. They declare that she's guilty, and her, Anne, and like 5 dudes who were accused of having an affair with her, including her brother, are all executed. So
Wow.
the dudes are executed by axe, and then Henry does one favor for her and gets a fancy fresh French executioner to use a sword and do like one swift,
How's that a favor?
because otherwise it was like an English dude hacking your head off.
Oh, so it was going to take a lot longer.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. So we got like, the top executioner to do it. So Anne dies, And the next day, Henry gets engaged to one of her ladies in waiting, Jane Seymour. So I always think it's hilarious that Jane Seymour is also the name of the actress who plays Dr. Quinn, Medicine
Yeah, I
Woman.
was gonna say that sounds so familiar.
Isn't that like, it's just weird that's her name, and then there's also this Jane Seymour in history. But third wife, Jane Seymour, Henry is, allegedly in love with her. She does have a son. So this is his son, Edward. He will be King Edward the Seventh eventually, or the sixth. Oh my God, Roman numerals. Edward the Sixth later. So it's plague time, so the people don't really get a lot of time with Jane, but she's around and they seem to like her. She's a very dutiful wife. And unfortunately, after she has Edward, she dies a couple months later from complications of the birth. So that's just another thing of like having babies is really hard even now, but even then it was just like awful and disgusting. It was probably an infection that ended up killing her. So that must have been really painful and awful. So Jane dies, and Henry's sad, but he needs to make more babies. He needs to have that backup son. He's that spare. So he already has one. And he marries a woman named Anne of Cleves. So Anne of Cleves is his fourth wife. And let's look at this, my thing. So when he married Jane Seymour, she was 28 and Henry was 45. So we're starting to see a little bit of a gap. Anne of Cleves, when they get married, is 25 and Henry's 49. So
Ooh,
this is a little gross.
yeah.
So Anne doesn't speak English. She only speaks German, but she is brought by Henry's advisor, Cromwell, and sets them up. And eventually Cromwell will die because Henry doesn't like this marriage. And so he kills his like one of his oldest friends because of this. But that marriage was never consummated between Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves. And it's for a couple reasons that people think it was. One, he just like couldn't do it because he was old and starting to, lose his veracity. And
Would you say 48?
yeah, but he was also like really overweight and like it was the 1500s, so I feel like I don't know.
48 is probably like 82.
Yeah. Yeah. I say not great. He's not great at this time. And she's doesn't really know what's going on either. So they definitely had a thing where like she was like, "Oh, he kissed me," and her ladies in waiting were like, "That's not gonna do it, hun. Like we're not gonna make a baby that way."
I read a thing about him forever ago that I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that towards the latter stages of his life, he was so overweight that they had to create these mechanical devices to just move his body around. Like he wasn't able to like actually be ambulatory on his own.
He definitely has an infection from like a hunting accident in his legs, and his legs produce so much pus, he has to wear a different pair of pants every day.
Ugh, God,
So,
so much detail.
so fucking gross. So he's not in like the pinnacle of health at this moment. And so he uses his pull and says, I need this marriage annulled because I'm not gonna be like they have sex and she's very pretty.
Wait, Taylor,
And
pause. It was cutting out. The audio it's choppy.
okay,
Okay,
is it back?
Yeah, it's back. You can like go back
Okay.
to after the pus thing.
Okay, so now Henry wants this marriage annulled because he's like, we're not having sex, we're not gonna have a baby. I don't think she's very pretty. I don't really like her. She doesn't speak English, and she
You
was
knew all
engaged.
this. Like
I know.
Okay.
There's a story that like maybe the painting he got of her was like a little bit generous, so he was like, this isn't what I expected, and
Oh, that's
he,
right. He would have gotten a painting of her. That's
like he like didn't know you get a painting and be like, I guess this person looks fine.
yeah.
Guess I'll marry them, and he. Also, she was engaged when she was like 6 as like another like political thing. And he used that as a reason for the annulment as well. Because he was like, wasn't she was never mine to begin with, whatever. So that one actually got annulled, that divorce annulled. And he gave Anne of Cleves some money and she got to live out her life. She actually became good friends with him afterwards. Like once their marriage was over, they became friends. And she was, really good friends with his children as well. So she's kind of in the picture. Later, she wants to marry him again. And he's like, no, nah, not really. But
Why?
so Anne of Cleves is just like around. So now he needs to marry someone else. And he wants to marry someone like smoking hot to prove that he can like have sex with someone. So he finds another lady in waiting, and her name is Catherine Howard. So she's his youngest bride. She's 16 and he's 49
Oh
when
my
they get married.
God.
So that's gross. Catherine Howard is very pretty. She has a history of flirtation. So she allegedly went to this all-girls school when she was very young that had a reputation for like letting boys sneak in at night, like teenage stuff. And She doesn't have any kids with him. They're not married for very long. And she probably does have an affair with one of his guards named Thomas Culpepper. So Henry finds out and he's pissed and he doesn't want to be made a fool again. So he charges her with adultery. And there's some people who confess that they've seen her with Thomas. And so everyone gets their head cut off. Catherine, her friends who were like the witnesses on the stand, Thomas's head gets cut off and it gets put on the London Bridge on display, which is fun.
That is
Um,
fun, Taylor.
like that's fun. So they're dead. That's the last one. That's the fifth wife. And then his final wife, her name's Catherine Parr. She is so this means he's married of all of his wives, 50% are Catherine's, 33% are Anne's, and 17% are Jane's. So he just married a lot of Catherines. And Catherine Parr is a widow. She's been married two times before, not seven, like that song. And she was involved in the education of Henry's children. She was very smart. She published books on prayer. I think she was one of the first women in England to publish a book. So super smart. And when he went traveling, he would leave her in charge. They were never going to have kids because at this point, well, she was an old maid at 31 and he was 52. So they probably weren't going to have any kids, but he wanted to like have a companion. So he was married to her. So by this time, I wrote, he's leaking, he's not doing well. And obviously during this whole story, there's like huge political things happening that I'm not even talking about, but we're just talking about like this man's desire to have an heir and his desire to continue to be king. So Henry dies in 1547. He leaves her money. So he leaves his last wife, Catherine, some money, and she marries Jane Seymour's brother. So Jane Seymour, the wife who had died after childbirth,
Right.
her brother marries Henry VIII's sixth wife, and it's accounted that she really loved him, and like this was a person that she had actually wanted to marry. This is her fourth marriage because her first three husbands died, and it sounds like that'd be really fun. Except it does sound like that they got Queen Elizabeth as a child to look after her, and the husband wants to marry her, so he like molest slash courts her when she's very young, while he's married to Jane, which is terrible. And Elizabeth has like tons of problems growing up, and a lot of it probably is because of this abuse that she suffered at this time, living with her dad's like widowed wife and her step uncle. It's very confusing. So
It's so, I mean, that's the thing that, okay, so this is why, like I said earlier, I never go deep or have gone deep on royalty and royal families, is because it's so weirdly interconnected. It's like this guy's fucking like related to that guy, and his sister
mhm.
married that uncle and the cousin, and it's just, yeah, it's just confusing.
Yeah. And then either way, poor Jane does die at the age of 36. She gets pregnant, which is a surprise because she's 36. And she dies after childbirth as well because having babies is awful.
Yeah.
And so she dies from that eventually too. And so, I mean, the moral of the story is that what happened is there's no moral, but what happened is Henry VIII needed an heir and he did anything he could to get it. So his son, Edward, his son did become king when Henry VIII died. He was only king for a few years and then he died. He was a teenager when he died. And then his sister Elizabeth became queen because she was officially the next in line because Mary was not because her parents had gotten divorced. So, the good news is Anne Boleyn did get executed for a reason. She knew why she was doing it, and she was doing it so her daughter could become queen, and she did. So she got what she
Nice.
wanted like later in life. So good for her, except she died really young and tragically. And yeah. Do you think that when your head gets cut off that you are still awake for like a couple seconds?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I don't know.
Me
I
too.
think that's probably the better way to be killed, isn't it?
I mean, it sounds swift when it's swift.
I don't like the whole hacking at your neck thing that you mentioned
No.
earlier.
Yeah, I hate that.
Do you think that if you were in that position, do you think the people who were royalty those days, do they ever have moments where like, why am I doing this? Like I could just like
Maybe.
sell fish. Like how hard would it be to sell fish? Nobody's trying to kill me. Nobody's trying to poison me. I don't have to be executed because I'm not having sons. Like I don't know. I feel like a simpler life would be preferred.
yes and no. I feel like now you can easily be like Prince Harry and be like, I'm gonna go live in LA and like calm down. But I think then if you weren't like in the court, you were like living in a pile of shit.
Yeah, yeah,
Like London was like disgusting and it was like plague time. And so I don't know. I feel
that's
like
a good point.
there was a big jump between a regular person and royalty, like bigger. I mean, now it's a huge jump, but I feel like even then it was like even worse.
Yeah,
But I don't know.
I mean, the reason Game of Thrones is as popular as it is the sheer intrigue and fuckery that goes on. It's just like a byproduct of being in that position.
And it's fascinating because all the stuff that happens like I mean, minus the dragons and like other magical things, it's all stuff that's happened. And like we're super fascinated, I think, as like a right now in our media with like medieval time living. I mean, there's Game of Thrones, there's the Lord of the Rings that are kind of like medievally. I watched all of Willow, which was a delight. It's always something that you want to feel it's like courtly thing. My husband was watching Star Trek and it kind of felt courtly. Like there were like kings and queens and all
Yeah,
those stuff. So I don't know, people love that shit.
I recently there so recently these markets started up in Austin that I now regularly attend, and they're witches markets, and it has the air of a Renaissance fair. It's so fun. It's just people
That
go,
sounds awesome.
yeah, people just make stuff and then they show up and they have little booths and that, yeah, like this necklace is from a witches market.
Ooh.
Yeah, $15.
What's it
Totally
supposed
worth it.
to do? It's supposed to do something?
No, it's tiger's eye. It's supposed to just be like a good luck thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have I have some crystals here. I
yeah.
don't know.
I
I have
got
this black one that's supposed to like calm me down and like help me focus. Like I don't like obviously like why would I suspend my belief to believe that this could do this when I'm like very mad about belief in general, but I don't fucking know. So I'm just
yeah.
hanging out with my crystal.
I got a big crystal too from the witches last witches thing.
I love it. I want to go next time. That sounds really fun.
Hey, you brought up Meghan and Harry.
Hmm.
I probably have a controversial opinion about that.
What is it?
Like you know what the fuck you're getting into.
I know.
And
No,
it's
that's
like
not
and it's like and
controversial.
it's like it's not the role of a spouse to like show up and just derail everything that you have known and you're I'm not saying that it's good. I'm not saying like defending the royal family by any means,
Yeah.
but like if I'm married into like a old-timey family that was like that's just how that's all they've known. And it's like, no, you're
Yeah.
gonna change how you're gonna be and this like who are you? Like
I totally agree. I felt that way until yesterday when I like maybe I'm leaning 20% on her side, but I'm like, yeah, this is kind of dumb and like it's about time it ended. So like if you can be a part of that ending after all these like hundreds of years and like millions of people dying for no reason, then like that's great. So I kind of felt a little bit on her side for just a second yesterday, but most of the time I feel like that. Like Kate Middleton understood the assignment.
yeah.
You just like be pretty and do charity work. What
Yeah,
do you
like
think was gonna happen?
I feel like she did like a disservice to her husband, which is like abandon, like be outcast from everything you know.
Hmm.
Because Diana, his mom was also like their family was also of royalty of some kind. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
just a coincidence that him and her and the fucking doofus looking guy, whatever the king now, got together. Like there was a reason for that. Like they were intent. Anyways, whatever.
Yeah, well,
It's
just
a
like Henry the
sidetrack.
Eighth's wives, like that's why it's like all for like political purposes and like all these
Yeah,
things and like very silly. And I'm gonna try to flip my my skepticism to being to enjoying what Megan's doing because I'm like, fuck these guys, you know.
yeah, yeah.
I'm okay with it, but I wasn't until yesterday when I was thinking about all of this stuff, and I was like, man, if Anne Boleyn could have like had a podcast, she'd be like, the fuck is going on?
The fuck is
That'd be
going
fun.
on?
Yeah, fuck is
Generally
going on with Anne
speaking,
Boleyn?
don't get married to try and change that person. Try
Yeah,
not to.
100%. 100%. Cool.
Awesome,
Well, that's it.
Taylor. Thank
Thanks.
you for that.
Hmm.
I do want to call out the fact that I feel a little bit low energy today, given the fact that I spent all day moving. And
That's okay.
so I will try to liven myself up as I start
Okay.
speaking.
Okay, I'm ready.
Moving sucks.
Yes, don't. Oh, it sucks. All right. Hope you enjoyed that story of Anne Boleyn.